Are you ready?
I think so.
No, we're not starting until you finish the year.
What?
We're not starting until you finish the year. I can't stand listening to you talk and eat at the same time. Jay, welcome back to Sharp Stories. I am embracing my Canadian, as I am part Canadian now.
Okay.
And it's obviously a snow day. So,
yes it is.
there it is.
Yes it is.
Take the boy out of the farm, but you can't take the farm out of the boy, hey?
The wife made me do it. Big legislation change.
Big legislation change, yes.
Happened last week.
Yep, November 24th. And
We need to start doing real-time videos, Al, when these things take place, not this set Wednesday
following us
schedule.
Around 20.
Like something happened, come to the house. Anyway,
but to take effect immediately as well. There's not
it's already
even
done.
like
It's in effect.
There's not even like a
Grace period.
runway into this. But so the majority of that decision that's catching headlines is the removal of rental restrictions in buildings. They can still keep their short-term rental restrictions, less than 30 days, Airbnb, VRBO.
Booking.com.
But the other thing that's on there as well, not talked about so much, is the excuse me, age restrictions.
Jesus.
So that's also been restricted other than the 55 plus buildings.
So as some of you may know, there used to be, so when we look at the bylaws, if the realtors are being diligent, obviously every realtor, all 15,000 of us are as diligent humans as you're ever going to find, they will put restrictions in place, pet restrictions, rental restrictions, and age restrictions. So there's two main age restrictions. There was a 55 plus, so you got to be 55 or older to live in the building, buy in and live there. Then there was 19 plus. So the argument was that if you have kids that are under 19, you cannot buy in the building.
Okay, it's a no. Thank you.
They can't live in the building. So now, both of those I've heard legal cases trumping those bylaws. However, on the street, when people are looking at buying, they're not going to say, I'm going to take this on because there was a legal case that won and I'm going to go through that headache. They're just not going to bother. So the before 55, the 55 plus is still in place. So in a couple of years, I'm just going to buy in and not have to worry about any goddamn kids hanging around. And then they've
mentioned that you're close to the age of 55.
They've abolished the 19 plus. So there's no age restrictions under 55 now.
Nope. So then on the rent restrictions, most of the buildings allow rentals of some variance anyway before this change. Whether that was a certain percentage were to be allowed to be rented, whether everything could be rented, or whether it was like a 6-month minimum, that's now all gone. Basically, all the rent restrictions are pretty much gone other than short-term rentals. Plus 30 days is considered a long-term rental in this case. Minus 30 days is considered the short-term, but you can basically rent out anything. And this argument, so this is twofold, because there's one side of the argument, which is we desperately need the supply.
This is what I've recently learned they call steel manning. Let's steel man this, this circumstance. Let's support either side, show supports of either side.
Okay, so the steel manning of such is we desperately need the supply, but is government mandating or strong arming or steel manning?
That's not what steel manning means.
Okay. When in Rome, you probably haven't seen that film, have you? Anyway, is the government coming in and strong arming this and making it mandatory? Is that the answer? And I think it's the second point of how government has done it, whether it is the point up for debate. We're all aware that we need more rental supply. We can agree on that. How we get there though, I'm gonna take a bit of a surprising turn to this actually, and so I think we'll come to that.
Nothing you do is surprising, ever.
We'll come to that later. So
the most predictable human on earth.
That's the question on how they've done it, which has caused a little bit of the kickback. And I think that's been amplified more because, I think they just wrapped up the look into the Emergencies Act, and we've come from 2 years of lockdowns, mandates, which has already caused such a storm, I think across the world, let alone Canada. So coming in now and saying we as the BC government are mandating this to happen.
We follow orders, son. We follow orders or people die. It's that simple. Are we clear?
it's just the climate of today's day and age, which I think is adding to that as well.
Despicable government overreach is what you're trying to say.
I actually don't think so in this case.
You wouldn't, but it is.
Okay, I don't think so in this case. And the reason being is they are adding. So there's a difference between adding and being taken away. So one of the big conversations and one of the big pushbacks was, why are you not targeting short-term rentals more? Short-term rentals were hugely targeted before anyway, to the point, very restricted if you can do short-term rentals these days. But when you look at the numbers, there's about 50,000 legal Airbnbs that have been declared with licenses at the moment.
Yep.
And there's about 300,000 that this will directly add to the rental supply. So that's not just, oh, these are now 300,000 homes which are going to now be available for rent. This is what they actually think will be added to the rental supply. How they get those numbers, I don't know. So when you look at the numbers, there's a lot more to be gained from the rentals than there is from the Airbnb. And that's assuming if Airbnb was stopped, excuse me, every Airbnb would be rented out and you'd get 50,000.
So they said by looking at the rebates for the vacancy tax that were blocked because Stratas had their deadlocks in these buildings of no rentals, they figured, I thought it was 29,000 units were applicable to that. 2,900 units were applicable to that.
Yeah, so it's about 3,000, right?
Not 30,000 or 300,000?
No. So this is just by changing rentals. So there's changing rental restrictions in buildings that now become available. Then there's the empty homes. So they reckon there's about 3,000 empty homes that will be added to the rental supply because they're just sitting empty right now. And to your point, if you're due to pay empty homes tax, but your building does not allow you to rent it out or to put somebody in there, you can usually get a waiver on that every year. So it's still declared, but they're not paying the fee because they're restricted. So now it's going to add those 3,000 homes to the rental supply. So when you look at it in total, let's just say in total 300,000 additional units to the rental supply.
Is that buildings, total buildings with full rental supply, or with full rental ban now alleviated, or exposing 300,000 units to not being rented?
This is just basically with all of the changes, when all is said and done, with people who are just going to either sell units or whether they're going to not move anyone in, it's going to add 300,000. So that is incorporating buildings that had an outright ban on rentals, buildings that just had 6-month minimum rentals.
So they figure total applicable supply, every avenue,
300,000.
Okay.
So at most, short-term rentals are going to do 50,000, assuming every one of them did that. So from a number standpoint, it doesn't work. And the other thing is, if you attack the short-term rentals, you're basically attacking somebody's ability to make money through smart investing. And then all of a sudden, you're taking away. And that actually has financial repercussions to people who maybe own those properties, rely on that income, and they're doing it all legally. However, if you live in a building that doesn't allow rentals right now or allows a few rentals beforehand, your day-to-day use does not change at all. You can use your condo as you were doing so before. It's not going to overcrowd your condo because there's no additional units or something going in there. It doesn't actually change it on a day-to-day basis. If anything, it actually probably adds to your market value in the end. And I also mean that as, then there's the question will come up with, well, when governments add things in, it costs taxpayer dollars. And that I would agree with. However, this is not going to cost taxpayer dollars. This is adding to the pie, not taking away from. So I can get on board with that a lot more than if they were to turn around and say, okay, no short-term rentals are allowed ever in BC anymore because, yeah, we're doing this.
The biggest complaints that will property values of those properties go up? Yes. Is property value the be-all and end-all for all owners? No. Will there be potential disruption in quiet livability? There's a lot of fear that what if we pick the wrong tenant and the tenant goes in and the Tenancy Act protects the hell out of them, so then we're screwed. There's a potential that these people are now exposed to that, yes. I think to your point of it adding, The bigger picture is still the fact that the government has jumped in and said, you can no longer do what you want to do, which is keep people out. And I don't think that's fair.
So this is where we disagree. I think as a growing city, you can still do what you want to do. I don't think it's your right to keep somebody out of the building.
100% it's the right of the people that own the building.
But again, okay, so when did these bylaws come into effect? Because in order for things to change, it needs to be a 75% vote. And if these things came into effect in 1995, and we're now in 2022, is it still the same mindset looking at that? Is it
they can go to vote at any time they want?
Yeah, if they want to drive up a vote and actually vote it out.
Yes.
However, you're basing off of previous bylaws made by previous people. And yes, you can make the changes and whatnot, but the other thing is to most people as well, or most buildings, it's a small number who actually do not allow rentals. A lot of them allowed rentals anyway, so you're just now allowing more rentals. Because they were restricted, so they were like 30% of the building can be rented, or 10 units maximum. Okay, well, you're already used to dealing with renters in the building, and so now you're just gonna have more renters.
Yes, but to your last point, there's now 300,000 units that are now exposed, tied to however many buildings that turns into. There's still, I don't believe there's
about 22,000 buildings that they think this is going to make an effect to across, and mostly it's going to be the smaller buildings under 50 units, and that's across BC.
I think it's wrong. I understand from the perspective of, is this the best and fastest way to get inventory to market? It's the fastest way, yes. Okay, yeah. So they can have that. But what you're doing is saying, you 22,000 buildings can no longer do what you want to do. It's you know, stratas, bylaws, all this sort of stuff.
How does it change your use of the building?
It doesn't matter. If someone doesn't want it, they should have the right not to want it. And you shouldn't say, well, we've screwed up. Where has the city screwed up? Red tape and tying the hands of all the developers to build more inventory. We can agree on that. So the city screwed up from that regard, and now they're saying, we screwed up. They're never going to admit this, of course. Wasn't me. So you 22,000 homes, you're dealing with our problem now by not being able to do what you want to do, and that's bullshit.
Of course, when it goes back to the start of it, they screwed up. Yes, I do highly agree. But I do think that this change is a welcome change, and I do agree with it, because to that point, I don't think that you should be able to change. Like, you should be able to keep people out. You can keep people out of your own home. Yeah. They're not moving into your home. And how many, like, people who live in buildings that are like condos, that's the word. People who live in condos, how often do you see people? These people who are now allowed to rent, you're never gonna see them. And as far as a lot of people are saying the Strata insurance. Strata insurance is going to go up. It's going to cause Strata insurance to go up. But okay, so have the rental restrictions stopped Strata insurance going up? No, they haven't. It's already gone up. If the insurance companies want to put the premiums up, they'll put the premiums up and they'll find a way, regardless of whether you have
this is another example, another excuse for them to do so, potentially.
Well, most of the Strata insurance increases were due to the like deductibles.
Yeah, 2 years ago, whatever it was. But that doesn't mean they can't go higher.
Last time I checked, renters do not enjoy floods as much as your regular homeowners.
There's a factual statement behind owners will take better care. No questions asked. I think that's common sense.
Owners will take better care, yeah, within their unit.
Within everything, within their unit, within their building, they pay. No one likes strata fees. Those fees get distributed, they keep the building in a certain way. So those owners who pay to keep everything in line, pay to get in, should have the right to say yes or no. We want short-term, long-term. We want the 19 plus. I kind of disagree with. I think that's stupid because you buy it and then you have a kid. You got to deal with legal issues. Move like that's just doesn't make sense. But everything else, I think, no, I disagree with it. Will it bring the product to the market fastest? Yes. Should it be done this way? Absolutely not. And it's a short-term fix for a bigger government screw-up yet again that we have to deal with.
It's definitely a bigger problem, but I do think it's one of the only options that they can do right now. And I personally
isn't that convenient?
I personally agree with it. And again, yeah, who caused this problem? Yes, but it's not about now. It's just
Well, you can't point fingers. That doesn't do anything, so we just got to screw everyone over in the short term. It's ridiculous. It's a scapegoat move, and I
think it should be allowed, but nonetheless,
you're
what
wrong.
I will caveat though is, and a lot of people have been saying this, is this now going to bring prices down for rent? No, it's not going to bring prices down.
No, I agree with that too.
Real estate is a numbers game, and we are vastly short on supply. So adding 300,000 helps, but we're not all of a sudden massively oversupply now, and you're at a huge advantage where you can go and negotiate with landlords and things, because we are at usually less than 1% vacancy rates.
And from that perspective, you have the people that are now in buildings that can be rented. Of course, that doesn't mean anyone's going to do it, A. B, the people that are protected by those past rental restrictions from their vacancy tax exposure that are no longer protected, those units will, my guess would be the majority of them will come to the resale market and not just be tenanted. Now, if those are purchased by investors or not is a whole other story, but a lot of the people that hold vacant property as just an asset play aren't going to, even you can put a management company in place, they're not going to deal with that. They're just going to sell, I think.
Yeah, and again, okay, so let's say those 3,000 empty homes, it's such a small number that and again, it's across BC, this isn't just Vancouver.
Yeah.
It's not going to make a difference. This is not going to make any sort of difference at all to resale, in my opinion. A few more properties may come to market in the grand scheme of things, yes. But this is really going to affect renters, more as in renters particularly, and maybe sellers when it comes to, oh, my home is worth a little bit more.
I think the biggest,
that takes time to trickle in.
The biggest thing it affects is the values of those units in those buildings now that were restricted and are not.
Because a lot of the time when people are looking, they are, if you say to someone, what is your criteria? Most buyers are outright, I need rentals. It's not a, oh, maybe I'll look at a rental building that allows it or doesn't allow it, or maybe I'll look at an age-restricted building. It's either a yes or no story. So that will allow those buildings to have a lot more exposure for sure.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the people that you see, the people that I see, most of them are pretty optimistic when they're buying in. They're going to hold for 3 to 10 years and are under the assumption at this end of the equation that in 10 years, I very well may be in a position where I can hold this, make that an investment property, and then buy my next principal residence. Yeah. And that's a very...
in reality, that never happens. Very few times it happens. Most people need to sell in order to buy up.
True, but that's a huge peace of mind at the front end of the equation a lot of the time that I see. If it plays out or not, to your point, most of the time I don't see it doing so because most people want to buy up as they move forward and they need proceeds of sale for the most part. But I've seen a lot of time that people will shy away from places that don't allow rentals even though they're in no position to need a rental today. Peace of mind of knowing they have that potential is big.
Yeah, hugely. And to your point, even though if they don't need that rental, a lot of buyers think at the time as well, that's going to restrict me later on, maybe when it comes to selling or something like that as well. So it adds an unnecessary stigma, even if it's not actually relevant to that individual's specific needs at the time or even in the future. So only time will tell. We're going to agree to disagree. I think that wraps us up pretty much for this week.
Okay, we agree. We're not wrapped up. You agree that the 19 plus is a welcomed elimination?
Yep.
Okay, we agree there. 55 plus, look, should the 55 plus be removed as well?
No, I can see them keeping that.
They're keeping it, but should it have been removed as well?
No, I don't think so.
Just poor old people, we shouldn't.
Well, look at how many buildings are 55 plus. How many like renters out there are
still buildings?
How many renters out there are like would be dying to get into those types of properties? I just think it's so minimal.
But it's not about that, it's about opening inventory. And I'm not saying I agree that it should be either, but I'm just curious on, it would have opened more. I think it's interesting that they didn't.
Well, I think a lot of the reason being is if you go to like 19 plus buildings, you'll find like your everyday concrete building or wood frame building or whatever. A lot of the 55 plus communities are, especially as you go out to places like Langley, they're like the townhouse, single family detached structures that kind of look like a holiday camp as you drive in and drive around, right?
I've never seen those before in my life, so I don't know.
I've sold a couple of them. I'll show you afterwards. It's cool being a realtor. But they're very Langley.
Langley?
Langley, yeah.
Langley?
Langley, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And so they're kind of situated for that. And the other thing as well is there's usually not as many units in those type of complexes as you would be looking at in, say, like in like a high-rise building or something like that. So for the difference it makes versus the trouble it causes, like the 19 plus is just kind of like it's a moot point, right? Like people are moving into 55 plus homes are typically not looking at starting families or growing. There are a lot of downsizes, or they're just looking at that until they leave feet first, as I'm told that they say all the time. As opposed to like 19 plus, people are still looking at creating families, building, and so it just doesn't, the 55 plus, I can see why they kept it, and the 19 get rid of. So we agree on those fronts.
And then obviously Airbnb shouldn't be touched, we agree there.
Yeah.
And I think that's all they changed.
But then the allowing of rentals, of the government, it being okay that the government has just banned right and said, no, you're allowed rentals, that's what we disagree on.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Okay, we're gonna have to disagree on that one.
I know you're just disagreeing with me for the
Nope.
banter, as you like to call it, because you couldn't honestly agree with that, because it's ridiculous. I'll see you next time. It's been a pleasure.
See you next week, guys.
Like, subscribe, comment below. I'll see you in the comments. See you later.